The training gym reeked of sweat, rubber mats, and ego. It was the kind of place where new recruits came to prove something. To themselves, to their instructors, or to the ghosts they carried in their heads. The sound of gloves hitting pads echoed off the concrete walls as pairs of trainees sparred under flickering fluorescent lights. In the corner, a woman tied her hair back into a tight braid. No name tag, no visible rank. Just a simple training uniform, and a focused calm that didn't belong in a room full of loud, restless men. New transfer? One of the recruits muttered, nudging his friend. Probably admin or medcorps, the other replied with a smirk. No way she's here to spar. When her name came up on the board, Daniels versus recruits, light drill, laughter rippled through the gym. One of the bigger guys, Corporal Wade, stepped forward and flexed his shoulders. Take it easy on her, someone joked. Wade grinned. Yeah, wouldn't want to break a nail. The instructor barked the usual safety rules. Light contact, no headshots, control your aggression. But no one was really listening. The recruits wanted a show, and Wade was ready to give them one. They circled each other on the mat. Daniels' stance was balanced, quiet, almost detached. Wade, bouncing and loose, threw a playful jab. She slipped it easily. Another came, faster this time. She ducked, pivoted, and tapped him lightly in the ribs. The laughter grew louder. Someone whistled. Wade's grin faltered. He came in again. Harder. She blocked, moved. No wasted motion. Her composure only fueled his frustration. Come on, someone shouted. She's making you look bad. Wade's eyes narrowed. He feinted left, then swung a sharp elbow, straight across her face. The crack of bone-meeting bones silenced the room. Daniels stumbled, her lips split open. Blood dripped down her chin. The instructor started forward, furious. What the hell, Wade? But Daniels raised a hand. I'm fine, her voice was calm. Almost too calm. She wiped the blood away with her sleeve, straightened, and looked directly at Wade. No anger. No emotion. Just a steady, unreadable stare that made him take a half step back. Then she turned and walked off the mat, heading toward the locker bay. The recruit started whispering immediately. Guess she couldn't handle it. Should have stayed in admin. Poor thing's probably crying already. Even Wade laughed again, though a flicker of guilt crossed his face. Didn't mean to hit that hard, he said, rubbing his elbow. But the instructor wasn't laughing. He stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the door she'd disappeared through. Sir? Wade asked, uneasy. The instructor's voice came out like gravel. You idiots have no idea who you just hit. The gym went quiet again. What do you mean? He didn't answer at first, just stared at the mat, shaking his head slowly, as if regretting every second that had just passed. Then finally he looked up. Get cleaned up, he said. All of you. Tomorrow's training is going to be different. Wade frowned. Why? What's happening tomorrow? The instructor turned, his tone suddenly sharp. Tomorrow she's running you through combat drills. And if I were you, I'd pray she goes easy. The recruits exchanged glances, confusion mixed with something else now. Who is she? One whispered. The instructor gave a grim smile. Someone who doesn't need a name to make you remember her. And in that tense silence, even the loudest voices went still, because deep down, they all felt it. They hadn't just messed with a new recruit. They'd woken something dangerous. The next morning, the air in the training compound felt heavier. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew something had shifted since last night. The recruits stood in formation under the rising sun, a row of cocky young soldiers who suddenly looked a lot less confident. Wade kept flexing his jaw, replaying the moment in his head. The elbow, the silence, the instructor's warning. Then the hangar doors opened. Daniels stepped out. Same simple uniform. No visible rank, but this time she wore a black combat harness, gloves, and a small headset clipped to her ear. Her lip was stitched, her expression unreadable. The instructor followed behind her, but unlike yesterday, he wasn't giving orders. He was silent, watching. Daniel stopped in front of the recruits, her eyes sweeping across the line. Yesterday was warm-up, she said quietly. Today we test survival. Her voice was low, but carried enough authority to make every man stand straighter. Wade frowned. "With respect, ma'am, what exactly is this test?" Daniels tilted her head toward the range behind them, an expanse of mock urban terrain used for close-quarters combat training. "You'll find out inside," she said. "Rules are simple. 3 objectives, 1 hour, full sim rounds." Wade exchanged a confused glance with his teammates. "And you?" he asked. Daniels just smiled faintly. "I'm the opposition." A murmur spread down the line. "Wait, just her? Against all of us? Is this a joke?" The instructor crossed his arms. "You'll be briefed inside. Dismissed." Inside the simulation zone, holographic drones buzzed to life, projecting a virtual cityscape layered over the steel structures. The system's voice echoed through their comms. Scenario: hostage recovery. Enemy sniper and ground operative confirmed. Mission timer: 60 minutes. The recruits fanned out, rifles raised, confidence starting to creep back in. "No way she holds against 12 of us," someone said. 5 minutes later, confidence turned to chaos. A single gunshot rang out, sharp, clean. The recruit at point dropped as his vest sensor flashed eliminated. "Where the hell did that come from?" Wade shouted, scanning rooftops. No answer. Another shot, another hit, then another. Within 10 minutes, half the squad was down. They hadn't seen her once. "Switch to thermal," Wade ordered. "She's gotta be on high ground." A voice crackled in over the comms, calm and controlled. "You're looking the wrong way, Corporal." Wade spun just as she appeared behind him, silent as shadow. Before he could react, she had his rifle twisted from his hands, the muzzle of her own pressed to his vest. Click. The simulation system beeped, eliminated Wade. Daniel stepped back, eyes cold but not cruel. "Still think this is a joke?" She disappeared again before anyone could answer. The rest of the squad regrouped, scrambling through alleys and rooftops. But she was everywhere, setting traps, using cover, predicting their movements like she'd been watching them train for weeks. By the 40-minute mark, only 2 recruits were left standing. Wade watched from the observation bay now, helmet off, chest still heaving. Every perfect movement she made, every calculated strike, told him what the instructor hadn't said yesterday. She wasn't some medic, she wasn't admin. She was special operations, and not just any. She moved like Tier 1. When the simulation finally ended, Daniel stood alone in the digital dust. Her weapon lowered. The system's voice declared, "Mission complete." 1 operative survived. Time, 42 minutes. Record performance. No one cheered. They just stared as she walked off the range. At the door, she paused, not looking back, just speaking evenly. "Next time you hit someone, make sure you know who trained your commander." Then she was gone. The training grounds were silent long after Daniels left. The recruits stood frozen, sweat dripping down their faces, each of them still trying to process what had just happened. 12 men, trained, confident, and physically at their peak, had been dismantled by a woman half their size in under an hour. Not because of luck, not because of simulation tricks, because she outclassed them in every possible way. Wade sat on the bench outside the barracks, helmet beside him, his pride shattered. The other recruits avoided his gaze, muttering among themselves. No one wanted to admit it, but they all felt it, the sting of humiliation, mixed with awe. The instructor finally stepped out from the hangar. "Debrief. 5 minutes," he barked. When they assembled inside, the holographic screen at the front flickered to life. A dossier appeared, blurred photo, classified tags, lines of redacted text. "Today's opposition," the instructor said, "was Operative Commander Arya Daniels, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DevGRU. Task Force 7. The room went dead silent. Wade frowned. "Wait, DevGRU? As in," the instructor nodded. "As in SEAL Team 6. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. "But that's," one recruit stammered. "That's not possible. There's no female SEALs." The instructor's gaze hardened. "That's what the press says." He let that sink in before continuing. "Commander Daniels earned her trident during a classified integration program. Half the Navy doesn't even know it happened. Her files sealed under black protocol. So, when I say you just got your asses handed to you by one of the most dangerous people on the planet, I mean that literally. Wade felt his stomach drop. He remembered the look in her eyes before the fight started. Calm, almost detached. Not arrogance. Focus. He'd seen that same look in combat footage of elite snipers and recon teams before missions. "Sir," Wade asked quietly, "why is she here training recruits like us?" The instructor's mouth twitched into a half smile. "You'll find out soon enough." Hours later, as dusk fell over the base, Wade was called to the operations tent. Inside, the glow from multiple screens lit up the room. Drone feeds, radar scans, mission briefings. Daniels stood there, arms crossed, speaking with a colonel and a communications officer. She turned as he entered. "Corporal Wade," she said evenly. "Walk with me." They stepped out into the cool night. The air smelled of sand and oil. She didn't speak for a while, and Wade didn't dare to break the silence. Finally, she said, "You hit me yesterday." His throat tightened. "Ma'am, She raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't apologize. You didn't know, and I didn't report it." That surprised him. "I don't need to embarrass anyone," she continued. "You were testing me." "That's good. You should test everything in this line of work. But you also need to observe before you act. You think fast, but you don't think long." Wade nodded, embarrassed but listening. She stopped by the firing range, now dark except for the faint gleam of the targets. "You see these?" she said, pointing at the silhouettes. "These don't move like enemies do. They don't scream. They don't crawl. They don't beg." Wade swallowed hard. She continued, her tone softer now. "You're training for a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. You hit the wrong wall, you die. You hesitate once, your team dies. The reason I'm here isn't to show off. It's to see who listens, who learns, who leads." She turned, finally looking him in the eye. "And who doesn't?" The next morning, a siren ripped through the base. Not a drill this time. "Hostile incursion. South perimeter." The loudspeakers blared. Every recruit scrambled for gear. Wade grabbed his rifle and helmet, heart pounding. Instructors rushed past shouting orders, while the airfield roared to life with engines and rotor blades. Daniels was already suited up. Tactical vest. Headset, rifle slung across her chest. The colonel barked. Perimeter breach confirmed. 2 transport trucks heading toward base. Possible insurgents. He turned to Daniels. "Commander, you'll lead quick response Bravo team." The recruits froze. She nodded calmly. "Understood." "Wait," Wade blurted, stepping forward. "You're leading us." She looked at him, a faint grin on her lips. "You wanted real combat, didn't you?" No one argued after that. Minutes later, the team rolled out in a pair of armored Humvees, headlights cutting through dust. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the hills. "Contact front," someone shouted as tracer rounds zipped overhead. Daniels ducked low, directing the convoy with calm precision. "Left flank suppressing fire. 2 and 3. Advance on my mark." Her voice was sharp, confident, completely unfazed by the chaos. Wade watched her movements. Every command she gave was clean, efficient, exact. The firefight intensified. RPGs streaked past, explosions lighting up the ridge. A vehicle flipped, smoke billowing. Wade saw one recruit frozen, panic setting in. Before he could move, Daniels sprinted forward, dragging the man behind cover just as another burst of gunfire tore through the sand where he'd been standing. "Eyes up, Marine," she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise. "You panic, you die. You move, you live." Within minutes, she rallied the line, coordinating fire like she'd been born for it. When the dust settled, the insurgents were down, the perimeter secure. Wade stood beside her, breathing hard, adrenaline crashing. She didn't celebrate, didn't boast. She just checked her rifle, nodded once, and said, "Good work." Later, back at base, the colonel approached her. "Hell of a job out there, Commander. You saved half those recruits." Daniels gave a small nod. "They saved themselves. I just reminded them what they're capable of." As she walked past Wade, she paused for a moment. "You hit hard," she said quietly. "Next time, aim better. He smiled despite himself. Yes, ma'am. That night, word spread through the base faster than any official announcement ever could. The woman they'd mocked. The one they'd called admin or liability. The one someone had hid in a moment of arrogance. Was a Navy SEAL, and not just any SEAL. She was Reaper 1. And the next morning, every man on that base stood at attention when she walked by. Not because they had to, but because they finally understood who she was. 2 days after the firefight, the base returned to its uneasy calm. The recruits drilled harder than ever. Daniels didn't have to yell. Her presence alone demanded perfection. No one wanted to repeat their first mistake, but Wade couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Reaper 1. He'd heard that code name before, once, in a rumor passed quietly among soldiers deployed in Afghanistan. A ghost sniper who operated outside the grid, unseen but always a step ahead of the enemy. Some said Reaper 1 wasn't even human, that she'd taken out high-value targets from impossible distances, single-handedly stopping ambushes before they began. Wade thought those stories were exaggerated. Until now. That night, while cleaning his rifle, he found Daniel standing alone at the far end of the range. The moonlight traced her silhouette, calm, still, silent. A sniper's posture unmistakable. He hesitated, then walked up quietly. Permission to ask something, ma'am? She didn't look away from the targets. You just did. He managed a nervous laugh. Reaper 1, that's you, isn't it? A long pause. Then she lowered the rifle, the faintest shadow of a smile crossing her face. Once, she said softly. A long time ago. Wade frowned. Why stop? Daniels inhaled slowly, gaze distant. You ever lose a team, Corporal? He shook his head. Then you wouldn't understand. The next day, orders came down from command. A reconnaissance drone had gone dark over the Kunar region, deep in enemy-held mountains. The colonel called for volunteers to recover it. Daniels stepped forward immediately. Wade followed without hesitation. Not this time, the colonel warned her. We can't risk you in hostile airspace again. Her reply was simple. You can't afford not to. Within hours, they were wheels up in a low-altitude transport, skimming the edges of dawn. The mission was supposed to be simple. Locate the downed drone, retrieve its encrypted drive, and return before the local insurgent patrols caught wind. But the second they landed, everything went wrong. The valley was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence. Daniels crouched, scanning the ridge through her scope. They know we're here, she murmured. Ma'am? Wade whispered. She pointed. Fresh prints, heavy, 24, maybe more. Before he could react, the first shot cracked through the air, pinging off the Humvee's hood. Ambush. Someone shouted. The hills erupted in gunfire. The team dove for cover as dust and bullets filled the air. Daniels moved like she was born in chaos, calling positions, returning fire, coordinating retreat paths, while rounds whistled inches past her head. Bravo, team. Suppress right ridge. Wade, left flank on me. Wade followed, adrenaline roaring in his ears. She slid into prone position, adjusted her scope, and took a single. Steady breath, crack. One hostile fell, crack, another. Each shot measured. Clean, absolute, but there were too many. Command. We're pinned! Wade shouted into his radio. We need extraction. Static, nothing. Signals jammed, Daniels said grimly. They planned this. She crawled up the slope, spotting a thin trail of smoke on the horizon, their drone wreckage. That's what they're after, she said. They want the encryption core. A round slammed into the rock beside them. Wade ducked. Then what do we do? Daniels checked her watch. We hold. Hold? We're surrounded! She gave him a look. Calm, sharp, unshakable. You think I've never been surrounded before? They fought for what felt like hours. The sun climbed high, the ground littered with brass and dust. Wade's arms trembled from recoil, his throat raw from shouting. Then a sudden explosion rocked the ridge. One of the recruits screamed. A hit. Daniels dragged the wounded man back behind cover, ripping open her medkit while firing one-handed. Pressure here, she ordered, voice steady. Stay with me, Marine. Wade covered her flank. but he could see it in her eyes. Calculation, timing, awareness of every moving piece. And then, for the first time, fear. "Command, this is Reaper 1, she said into her radio, switching to an encrypted frequency Wade didn't even know existed. "We are compromised. Requesting emergency air support. Grid 7-3 Alpha." The comm crackled. "Negative, Reaper 1. You are off record." "Repeat. Off record." Wade blinked. "Off record?" She lowered the mic slowly. "So they're still doing that," she muttered. "Doing what?" he asked. "Pretending I don't exist." Then she grabbed her rifle and stood. "Ma'am, what are you—" "Buying you time." Before he could stop her, she ran into the open, drawing fire from every direction. Wade yelled after her, but she didn't slow down. She moved like liquid, firing, diving, rolling, using every ounce of terrain like it was part of her body. For every bullet that grazed her, 2 found their mark. He lost sight of her for almost a full minute. Then, silence. The gunfire stopped, and when Wade looked up, every enemy gun was silent, every ridge still. Daniels was nowhere to be seen. Hours later, a rescue chopper finally arrived. Wade and the survivors were pulled out, bruised, burned, and shaken. The colonel met them on the tarmac. "Where's Commander Daniels?" Wade just shook his head. The colonel's jaw tightened. "Damn it." He looked down as if weighing something heavy, then said, "Get some rest, Corporal." Wade tried to protest, but the colonel cut him off. "You did your job." She knew what she was doing. He walked away, leaving Wade standing alone as the rotors slowed to silence. 2 days later, at dawn, the base sirens blared again, but this time, not for a drill. A shadow appeared at the gate. Daniels, her uniform torn, one sleeve missing, dirt streaked across her face. On her back, the drone's black box. She limped through the gate without a word, dropped the case at the colonel's feet, and said hoarsely, "Mission complete." The colonel just stared. "You walked 30 miles through enemy territory, with a bullet in your leg," she smirked faintly. "Would have been 29 if your pilot didn't fly like a drunk." The entire yard went silent. Even the rookies, every man who'd ever mocked her, stood in stunned respect. That night, Wade found her sitting by the range again, rifle across her knees. He said quietly, "They said you were dead." She shrugged. "They say a lot of things. Why come back?" She looked out at the stars. "Because someone's got to teach you idiots not to die before you learn to fight." He laughed softly. "Yes, ma'am." By the end of the week, the story of Reaper 1 spread across the base like wildfire. Not as a rumor this time, but as fact. And the same men who once saw her as an outsider now straightened their uniforms when she walked by, because they understood now. She wasn't just a legend, she was the standard. A week passed. The desert winds carried whispers, not rumors, not speculation, but stories. Every soldier on the base, from the lowest recruit to the highest-ranking officer, now knew the name Reaper 1, and unlike before, it was spoken with reverence. Still, Daniels moved through the compound the same way she always had, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. She ate with the trainees, helped with drills, patched scraped knuckles, fixed jammed weapons. She never demanded respect. It followed her like a shadow. One evening, Wade found her again by the firing range, her usual place. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of red and gold, and she was sitting cross-legged on the sand, disassembling her rifle piece by piece. "Permission to join you, ma'am?" he asked. She didn't look up. "If you can sit quietly." He sat beside her anyway. For a few moments, they said nothing. Just the metallic clicks of steel and the faint hum of wind. Finally, Wade spoke. "They told me what you did in Kunar. The drone wasn't just surveillance, was it?" Her hands paused. A muscle tightened in her jaw. "It contained the locations of every covert operator west of the river," she said quietly. "If they'd gotten it, entire teams would have vanished. You included." Wade blinked. "You went back for us?" She reassembled her rifle slowly. "Not for you. For the people who don't make headlines. The ones whose families never get told where they died. There was no pride in her voice, only exhaustion. He studied her face under the fading light. How do you live with it? Her gaze drifted to the targets on the horizon. You don't, she said simply. You just keep breathing so someone else can. The next morning, the base lined up for inspection. Daniel stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, as the colonel addressed the men. Before we begin, the colonel said, I've got an announcement. He glanced at Daniels. Commander Aria Daniels, Reaper 1, has been reassigned. Murmurs swept through the line. She's been recalled to DevGru Command for active status, he continued. Effective immediately. Wade's chest tightened. She's leaving? Daniels remained expressionless. But when the colonel handed her the sealed orders, her hand lingered for just a moment. Then she saluted. Permission to speak, sir? She asked. Granted. She turned toward the recruits. The same faces that once mocked her, doubted her, underestimated her. I don't care what your records say, she began, voice calm but fierce. I don't care how fast you can run or how many push-ups you can do. I care what you do when everything falls apart, when no one's watching, when orders stop making sense, when it's just you and the sound of your own fear. She took a slow breath. Every soldier thinks they're ready until they meet the moment that breaks them. When it happens, and it will, remember this. You don't win because you're stronger. You win because you refuse to stop moving. The yard was silent. No one dared shift or blink. She looked straight at Wade. You especially, Corporal. Don't just shoot straighter. Think longer. He nodded, throat tight. The colonel stepped forward. Commander Daniels, before you go, there's one last thing. He gestured to a man standing near the back. The crowd parted, revealing an older officer in a crisp uniform, medals glinting under the sun. The base went still. General Daniels' posture stiffened. Sir, the general nodded slowly. At ease, Commander. He studied her for a moment, then spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. 3 years ago, a classified file crossed my desk. Operation Iron Veil. A mission that was never supposed to exist. Every operative listed as KIA, except one. The file said she vanished into the mountains after rescuing 2 downed pilots and neutralizing a high-value target. They called her a ghost. The recruits glanced at one another. Wade's pulse hammered in his ears. The general continued, voice low. That ghost was you. Daniel said nothing. I didn't believe it, he admitted. I thought the stories were myth. But then I watched the footage from Kunar. He paused, meeting her eyes. I watched you hold that ridge alone. The silence was absolute. Even the wind had stopped. The general took a deep breath. You were never supposed to survive that mission, Commander. And yet here you are, training the next generation. Keeping the promise we broke. He stepped closer and, to everyone's shock, saluted her. Welcome back. Reaper 1. Daniels blinked once, then slowly returned the salute. That night, the base mess hall was alive with energy. Laughter, stories, pride. But at the far corner, Daniel sat alone, polishing her rifle, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. Wade approached her one last time. So, back to the field, huh? She nodded. Back where I belong. He hesitated, then said, We won't forget you, ma'am. She looked at him, really looked. Don't remember me, Corporal. Remember what I told you. He nodded. Refuse to stop moving, she smiled. Good. Hours later, before dawn, a transport helicopter lifted off from the base. Daniels sat in the back, the wind whipping through the open side door, her eyes fixed on the horizon. In her hand, a small metal insignia, a sealed trident, scarred and worn. She turned it over once, then clipped it back to her vest. Below, the base grew smaller until it disappeared into the sand. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The echoes of the past, the firefights, the losses, the silence, all faded into the hum of the rotors. Then she whispered to herself, just loud enough for the wind to carry. Mission never ends. At dawn, the recruits gathered at the range. Wade stood at the firing line, rifle steady, the rising sun in his eyes. He took a breath, calm, controlled, and squeezed the trigger. Crack. The bullet hit dead center. He smiled faintly. "For you, ma'am." Behind him, on the target wall, someone had stenciled 3 words in black paint. Reaper 1 lives. The desert was silent again. But silence in the military world rarely meant peace. It meant remembrance. The kind that lived on through stories, tattoos, and call signs whispered during long nights on watch. Weeks had passed since Commander Arya Reaper 1 Daniels left the base. Training resumed. Missions came and went. Yet every time the wind swept through the canyon, someone swore they could still hear the faint echo of a distant rifle shot. Crisp, perfect, final. The new recruits spoke of her like a legend. She wasn't human, some said. She was the mission, said others. But those who knew her best, the ones who'd seen her hands tremble after the battle, who'd watched her patch bleeding soldiers with nothing but grit and gauze, they knew better. She wasn't a legend. She was proof. Proof that heroes don't roar, they endure. Months later, deep in the Hindu Kush Mountains, a reconnaissance team was pinned under fire, outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded. Radio static screamed in their ears. The comms officer shouted into the mic, "Any allied units, this is Raven 3. We are taking fire. Coordinates incoming. Does anyone copy?" For 10 agonizing seconds, there was only static. Then a voice broke through. Calm, steady, unmistakable. "Raven 3, this is Reaper 1. Copy loud and clear." The team froze. The name hit them like a wave. "Impossible," one whispered. "She's not even—" But before he could finish, the canyon walls erupted with the distant thunder of a Ju-8 Avenger cannon. The ground trembled. Explosions ripped through enemy lines like lightning carving open the earth. Overhead, the unmistakable silhouette of an A-10 Thunderbolt swept across the sky. Low, precise, unrelenting. The soldiers below could only stare as their radios crackled again. Target neutralized. Path clear. Move now. Then silence. They never saw where she went. The jet vanished beyond the ridgeline, swallowed by smoke and sun. But from that day on, they swore, the Reaper still watches the battlefield. Back at the base, a plaque was quietly added to the wall. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a single inscription etched into steel, Commander Arya Daniels, Reaper 1. She taught us that the mission isn't about orders. It's about never leaving anyone behind, even yourself. Recruits would touch the plaque before every deployment. A silent ritual passed from one generation to the next. And every time a young soldier hesitated under fire, someone would whisper the same words Daniels once said. "You don't win because you're stronger. You win because you refuse to stop moving." As the sun set over the training grounds, Corporal Wade stood alone at the range, the same spot where it all began. The targets in front of him blurred through the shimmer of heat, but his aim was steady. He lined up his shot, took a slow breath, and just before pulling the trigger, he whispered, "For you, ma'am." Crack, perfect hit. He lowered his rifle and smiled faintly. Somewhere, in the distance, thunder rolled. Or maybe it was just an echo, because some echoes never fade. Heroes like Commander Daniels never look for medals, applause, or headlines. They fight battles the world will never know, and carry the silence that follows. If her story moved you, remember this. Courage isn't about strength. It's about never giving up when the mission seems impossible. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to honor the silent warriors among us. Subscribe for more true military stories of courage, sacrifice, and the human spirit.